We've already seen Jeff Brom go into the portal and bring a Louisville native home. Could he do it again, this time with Minnesota defensive back transfer Beanie Bishop? We'll talk about that recruitment and some more new offers here on today's episode of the show. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. As always, I want to say thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week. Your team, every day. As we mentioned in the opener, Jeff Brom has already done a great job at recruiting not only the state locally in the high school ranks, but also bringing some players home that went elsewhere, like Stephen Herron from Stanford. We'll talk about another guy from the city of Louisville that could end up coming back home. That's Beanie Bishop, played at PRP, also starred at Western Kentucky before transferring to Minnesota this past season. He has entered the portal, and he could be a prospect that the Cardinals are interested in. We'll also talk about 4 new offers, two in each of the last 2 segments. 2 from Texas, that is Landyn, Cleveland, and Aaron Flowers, 2 defensive backs. And then we'll talk about 2 from the state of Florida, Jose Leon from Columbus High School down in Miami, and then Elias Williams from Hudson High School down in Hudson, Florida. So beginning with another possible addition to the Louisville Cardinals transfer class. Like I mentioned, the team's still not done. Handed out an offer to Maryland offensive lineman Mason Lunsford this past week. We talked about why it makes too much sense for the Cardinals not to go after Lunsford and vice versa. But like I mentioned, there's a handful of scholarships left. According to Jody Demling, who I believe said that there were 7 scholarships available for the Cardinals to utilize, and you best believe that Jeff Brom and company are probably going to use all of them, if not the majority. So offensive line is a position of need to kind of bring some veteran leadership into that group. And then we look at the defensive back room. A couple of defensive back transfers. Marquise Groves-Killebrew, originally born in Louisville, grew up in Georgia, went to Texas A&M, transferred after his freshman season. Gilbert Frierson transferred from Miami, so on and so forth, right? But I think that you still can continue to address that position. I think Louisville is still in a spot to where they're looking to add valuable depth because you can never have too much. Obviously, you have guys like Quincy Riley coming back. You have a guy like, obviously, Marquise Groves-Killebrew. Added him into the mix. You have Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the former Florida State transfer, now possibly bringing another player home. For starters, bringing Beanie Bishop home is good enough for me. I think that at a position of need, in terms of depth, you're talking about a guy that starred at the Western Kentucky, at his stint at Western Kentucky, and also played decent in the Big Ten this past year for a defense that was one of the top 10 defenses in the country. It makes no sense why not to at least entertain this. I'm not sure how plausible this is, but it seems like where there's smoke, there's fire, and it seems like Louisville could definitely be in the mix here. Beanie Bishop from PRP High School, 5'10", 185-pound defensive back, was an all-conference performer while at Western Kentucky. I want to read you this excerpt from Gopher Illustrated. Ryan Burns of the Minnesota 24/7 sports site said this about the Beanie Bishop transfer. Minnesota football cornerback Beanie Bishop just announced that he plans to enter his name into the NCAA portal. Per his social media, the Louisville native played in 13 games for the Gophers last fall, but before beginning his career with the Gophers in 2022, was a 2021 All-Conference USA first-team defensive back, appearing in 36 career games for Western Kentucky, totaling 76 career tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 12 passes defended, 3 interceptions, and a forced fumble. In 2021, played the largest percentage of his snaps from the slot per Pro Football Focus. In his first year as a Gopher, Bishop played 303 defensive snaps for Minnesota, appeared in all 13 games, totaled 29 tackles with 1 sack and 1 pass breakup. He's the 8th Minnesota scholarship player to enter the portal, along with, get this, Braylon Oliver, who ended up, transferring out of Louisville. An interesting situation, was mainly, a backup, played a rotational role, started here and there, played a good amount of snaps for Minnesota, was in line to possibly be, a starting cornerback in 2023, but now obviously Minnesota has a lot of needs moving forward, but this is obviously a Louisville podcast, so we're going to talk about that. A guy that is a veteran presence, obviously you talk about the slot corner with Louisville's 4-2-5 defense that they're seemingly going to shift to in terms of base package. The defensive back versatility is at the forefront of importance. Gilbert Frierson played kind of like a safety linebacker hybrid at Miami. I know had to deal with multiple head coaches, but this is going to be interesting to see what the idea is, or the ideal role, I should say, for Frierson is at the next level. I would assume that, at the very least, Bishop is going to be a player that is going to be in the rotational 2 deep at the slot cornerback position. But I would assume that he possibly could be a starter. A guy that performed very, very highly at Western Kentucky. You have that tie to the program with Brom's tie to Western Kentucky, a player that is from Louisville, played at PRP, and not to mention his defensive backs position coach left at Minnesota, and Brom has coached against Minnesota. He's been able to not only see him grow at Western Kentucky, but also at the Power 5 level, in the same conference. So I trust the scouting here from Coach Jeff Brom. I think that this makes a ton of sense. You address depth at the defensive back position. I think that he is going to be more so a slot cornerback rather than a boundary cornerback, which is okay because you have Marquise Groves-Gilbert, you have Quincy Riley, who are probably the projected starters on the outsides for the Cardinals this upcoming fall. Maybe Jarvis Brownlee Jr., but that is yet to be seen. Needless to say, the overall position competition is going to be incredible in the offseason and in fall camp. So makes a lot of sense here for Louisville. You would then go out and get a veteran defensive back that has starred at Western Kentucky, that has played significant snaps in the Power 5 for one of the nation's best defenses in the Minnesota Gophers. But also, you bring a player home, and it continues that trend of guys that go elsewhere but come back home. And I think that that's one thing that you kind of forget, that even if you do recruit a guy heavily out of high school in the local ranks and he ends up going elsewhere, with the one-time transfer rule, immediate eligibility, I think that it makes a lot of sense to continue to keep tabs on players, because when they enter the portal, you saw Stephen Herron come back home, veteran guy that's going to try to make his name here at Louisville. Same case could be possibly here for Beanie Bishop. I think this makes a lot of sense for Beanie as well. Obviously, you lose your position coach at Minnesota. A solid program. PJ Fleck runs a very, very solid program. So I think that this is an opportunity to be another possible starting level player, just in a different situation. But you're able to come home, play an opportunity. I think maybe he has 1 to 2 years of eligibility left, probably 2, if I had to say. I'm not necessarily sure, but this makes a lot of sense for both parties. Obviously, for Louisville, you get a guy that can step in right away and maybe start as the slot cornerback, at the very least, is depth. Louisville native coming home, and for Beanie Bishop, like I said, Louisville player coming home, a guy that could have a ton of success in 2023 because of the schedule that presents itself, a lot of possible success in year one under Jeff Brom, and it's a very exciting time to be a Louisville Cardinal, for a handful of reasons, from a new head coaching change to the schedule not necessarily being the toughest, so on and so forth. So makes a lot of sense here, and we'll continue to keep tabs on this recruitment as we hear more. But I want to kind of go back into the high school realm. We'll talk about 4 new 2024 offers. We'll break it down to recruits per each of the past two segments. First up will be two defensive backs from the state of Florida, Landyn, Cleveland, and Aaron Flowers. We'll talk about both of them here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, FanDuel. We're over the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Obviously, my Houston Rockets are not good. They suck. They're the worst team in the NBA once again. But I still, first of all, it's going to be okay. We're going to get back to a national level of relevance. But in the meantime, I like to see what the spreads are on FanDuel. I like to see the player props for Jalen Green and Jabari Smith. I like to see how many projected three-pointers they're supposed to hit at the beginning of the game, so on and so forth. So do yourself a favor. Go check out the specific bets. Get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen every day. Make sure you check out our brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything you need to know about college basketball all in one place. Plus, hear from big-name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Heading on into the second segment of the show, Jeff Brom and company have been in a frenzy of handing out 2024 offers. I want to talk about two new ones from the state of Texas, two very highly regarded defensive back prospects, Landyn, Cleveland, and Aaron Flowers. Aaron Flowers ranked as the 228th best prospect in the country, 19th best safety, 36th best prospect in the state of Texas, four-star composite prospect, 6-foot safety, 185-pound star of Forney High School in Forney, Texas. Currently holds a crystal ball projection to Oklahoma, but has a ton of big-time offers. Alabama, Colorado, Baylor, Kansas State, Louisville, Michigan State, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, Mississippi, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas Tech, USC, Washington, so on and so forth. I honestly think, he's listed as a safety, but seemingly for Forney High School this past season, lined up more as a traditional cornerback. Granted, he has that versatility, which has kind of been the name of the game. We talked about Damani Maxson from the Houston area, four-star prospect from, the Houston area, defensive back that played both as a cornerback and as a safety with the, versatile defensive back base package 4-2-5 that Louisville is seemingly going to run. It seems like this makes a lot of sense. It's going to be a trend moving forward. Aaron Flowers is a guy that extremely solid at the line of scrimmage, extremely solid in the rushing attack. 55 tackles this past season for Forney High School, I believe either 8 or 11, one of those 8 or 11 pass breakups, and a couple of sacks to go along with that. Not the biggest defensive back, being 6 foot 185, but plays with a ton of explosion, a ton of aggression near the line of scrimmage. Very solid defending the run. Kind of reminds me, obviously size-wise, not so much, with Rajay Birds being a little bit of a larger defensive back, and I'm not so sure that he will play more of an outside linebacker. But, the way he defends the run, goes sideline to sideline, reminds me of how Rajay Burns used to play for Louisville. I think that he's a guy that when you look at the position he could play at the next level is projected as a safety, but I think, either in the slot, out on the boundary as a traditional cornerback, a hybrid safety that plays sort of in the slot. I think that's kind of where you're looking for, right? The safety / outside linebacker, kind of the position that Ben Perry plays currently, utilized in the rushing department, but also does a good job of dropping back into coverage. Very, very explosive defensive back that utilizes that explosion to, read the quarterback's eyes and go after the ball in the air. Does a good job of high pointing the football. I think that this is a prospect that, like I said, anytime you talk about a player from Texas, especially when they're highly regarded, it's going to be hard to take those players out of the state of Texas and from the area in general. Oklahoma State are around that area as well. I mean, you have LSU on the east. You have some other programs in the state of Texas on the west. You have, your West Coast schools. So ultimately, this is a prospect that I think really utilizes that ability to get into the opposing backfield, uses that speed, that strength, that quickness, that jolt, that burst to really make things difficult for opposing offenses. Another prospect that Louisville offered is Landyn Cleveland from Mansfield, Texas, plays for Mansfield Legacy High School. 6'1" safety, 190 pounds, ranked as the 459th best prospect in the country. According to the 24/7 Sports Composite, the 3-star is ranked as the 39th best safety, the 77th best prospect in the state of Texas. There are, like I mentioned, the top 500, there are nearly 80 prospects of those are from the state of Texas. That's just wild to me. But he holds a ton of, pretty solid offers. Got a Jackson State offer when Primetime was there. Offers from Colorado, Houston, Auburn, Baylor, Arizona, Louisville, Michigan, Mississippi State, Mississippi, Oklahoma State, Nebraska, Penn State, Purdue. So has that offer from Purdue. Former place of Jeff Brom. So that's something to focus on there is, he already had the Purdue offer. Actually, never mind. He got that on January 19th. I do apologize. But has had a ton of offers over the past, calendar year. Got the offer from Texas last June. Texas A&M seems like a spot that could definitely go after him here recently, or in the future, I should say. Has 33 total offers. But as Aaron Flowers is a player that's more so a hybrid defensive back, I think Landyn Cleveland is more of those center fielder type safeties that really spies on the quarterback, not the cornerback. Spies on the quarterback, does a good job of being in the right place at the right time. If I had to compare the way he plays to a former Louisville Cardinal, I think probably... Oh, great. The name is kind of escaping me at the moment. Let's see. Hakeem Smith. How did I forget that? Hakeem Smith was very, very solid in coverage. A guy that just appeared to make plays on the ball, always involved in the play, very solid coverage ability as well. I think that, he reminds me a lot of Hakeem Smith in the way that, he does a good job of winning those 50-50 balls, with his solid size for a defensive back, 6'1", 190, has that ability to really recognize plays as they progress and does a good job of reading the quarterback's motions, reading his eyes, and just being able to make an educated and well-founded guess on where that ball is going to go and being able to make a play on that. Does a good job, like I said, high pointing the football, has solid hands as well. So I think that, you're seeing Louisville really start to utilize the recruitment of defensive backs for the 2024 class. And this isn't the first two, prospects at the position that have been recruited by the University of Louisville. Obviously, look, I understand that there's going to be a ton of offers handed out by the University of Louisville. And you may think, why are we talking about each individual offer? That's how I'd like to run this show. I want to keep fans in the know. I'm not one of those people that's just going to have a show that is, made for generating reactions. I'd like to be more of an informational show. So when these players commit, when these players visit, when they cut their lists and we talk about them again, you can look back and think, okay, I might need a refresher when it comes to talking about this prospect, but I remember that name. So I remember Louisville offering, and then you hear say, "Oh yeah, that's right. 4-star defensive back from Texas, or 3-star safety from Mansfield, Texas, so on and so forth." I know we're talking about a ton of offers, and I do apologize if it gets redundant, but I like to have a more of an informational, calculated type of approach to this show. Obviously, we're going to have our takeaways, and we're going to be bold in our takeaways, but I also like to be informational as well. So with that being said, two more prospects to talk about on today's episode of the show. Now going into the Sunshine State, where Louisville currently has two guys committed, TJ Capers and Isaac Brown. One of these prospects we're going to talk about actually plays for TJ Capers High School. That's Jose Leon. We'll also talk about Elias Williams as well here in a second. Before we do that, I want to thank you all again, as I always do, for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, including YouTube and WHAS 11+, 5 days a week, your team every day. So the final segment of the show, we're talking about two new offers handed out to two 2024 Florida prospects. That's Jose Leon and Elias Williams. Both of these guys are not ranked in the 24/7 Sports composite. They are both 3 stars, according to 247sports.com. Leon, 5'10", wide receiver, 160 pounds, of Columbus High School in the Miami area. You look at the offer list. Doesn't have a ton of big-time offers. Louisville is his, I think, third now. Power 5 offer behind Central Florida and West Virginia. So as much as Louisville is trying to go after the big-time recruits in the state, we're also seeing Jeff Brom and company go after some of the unheralded guys that might be pretty solid recruits, but they just get overshadowed by the sheer amount of talent in a respective geographical area. Leon, this past season, played for a Miami Columbus team that featured a lot of defensive standouts. We talk about Dylan Stevenson, TJ Capers, so on and so forth. Not only that, but offensively they were solid as well. He caught 40 passes for a team that went 14-1 and won the Florida 4M title. 40 passes, 700 yards with 12 touchdowns. Had 2 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown in the final game in the state championship. The offers from Central Florida and West Virginia have come within the past month, so it seems like schools are starting to come around in this recruitment. Also runs track for Columbus, so a 2-sport athlete. When you watch his film, lines up pretty much mostly in the slot. 5'10" receiver, runs about a 4.5, so not the fastest player on the field, but does a good job of route running. A solid player at the line of scrimmage, does a good job of creating that separation, solid footwork. Does a good job of separating himself from his defender downfield. A lot of the opportunities that he had this past year were more so catching the ball in the intermediate area. So you're talking about like 18 to 25 yards downfield and being able to churn out some yards after the catch. It's going to be interesting to see if he is able to rise up the recruiting rankings. Currently, he's ranked as the 102nd best wide receiver in the country, the 104th best prospect in the state of Florida. I wonder, is this going to be a recruitment that Jeff Brom and company are going to overall prioritize? Are they going to try to get a commitment before his recruitment starts to vamp up? Or is this going to be one of those wait-and-see approaches where Louisville goes after some higher rated guys, which they've already offered, and if things don't work out there, then they might prioritize Jose Leon in the future. So that's something to focus on. The other unheralded guy is Elias Williams, the edge rusher from Hudson, Florida, which I think I want to check out where Hudson is. I think I have an idea, but so it's in Pasco County, so it's around the Tampa, St. Petersburg area. So that is exactly where I thought it was. Still a solid area. We talked about Miami being South Florida being a geographically, talented area. Tampa is as well. Elias Williams ranked as the 56th best edge rusher according to 247 Sports, the 116th best prospect in the state of Florida. Obviously, not ranked in the 247 Sports composite, but unlike Leon, has some solid offers already. Cincinnati has offered, Florida State, Kansas, Louisville, Miami, Central Florida, West Virginia. So you see some of those in-state programs that have already offered. I mean, Florida State offered 2 days before Louisville, Cincinnati 2 days before that, Miami 3 days before that. So a ton of offers. So his stock is starting to rise. 2-sport athlete, plays basketball, nearly averaged a double-double last year, but also played 2 ways at the high school level. Got snaps at the edge, defensive end, but also tight end and fullback. Hudson was pretty solid, and Florida's S2 class, went 9-3, had 51 tackles, 13.5 of those for a loss, 29 quarterback hurries, 2 forced fumbles, and 7 sacks. So it's one of those recruitments to where Louisville, it's smart to get into the mix early, because if you're not in early, you're probably going to be late, because Elias Williams' recruitment is going to take off. This screams a type of recruitment that a guy that could end up in the top 500, 600 players, a guy that, plays in a very talented area but had a good junior season, and a player that the in-state schools like Florida State and Miami are starting to recruit. So Louisville offering the most recent offer they offered, I think back on the 17th. I could be wrong. So just about a week ago. Going to be a recruitment that's going to be interesting to see. I would imagine that, Louisville, with the offers out to Dylan Stevenson, other edge rushers, obviously you're possibly going to lose Ashton Gelati maybe to the NFL draft this next season. And even if you don't, you still need that depth. Stephen Herron as well, grad transfer from Stanford, probably only 1 year. I think he only has 1 year of eligibility, but I'm not sure. Overall, I think that this makes sense. Louisville just continuing to try to go with the quote-unquote South Florida Blitz, according to Coach Stephen Herron, Coach Hova, as he's called. So 2 new offers out to Jose Leon and Elias Williams. So we're going to continue to talk about football recruiting as we get more news, which, shout out to Jeff Brom Company for continuing to hand out a ton of offers. So that's going to wrap up this episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here very soon.